Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Loftin, and I'm the Director of Customer Success here at Codility. We have a very informative webinar today, specifically targeting enterprises going remote. I'm excited to welcome hiring leaders from both Loft and Rakuten to discuss their experiences and approach as we navigate through these new normals. Before we begin, I wanted to touch on just kind of a few ground rules. We really want to make this webinar as engaging and interactive as possible. So we'd like to encourage folks listening today to be able to ask questions in the question queue throughout the program. We'd like to also begin with just a few short slides presented by one of our senior customer success managers, Sinead Starnes. Sinead's been working with enterprise hiring leaders for the last 4 years here at Codility and has really been helping them shape the remote hiring discussion with some of our largest customers. Sinead, I'll go ahead and turn over the slides to you.
All right, thanks so much, Scott. And just to do a brief introduction as well for the speakers that'll be coming up later on here in the presentation. We have Rick Iversen, who's the head of talent at Rakuten, and Andre Antonelli, a tech recruiter at Loft. I'm definitely really excited to hear from them on their insights. And again, I'm Sinead. I'm a customer success manager here at Codility. I mainly work with our enterprise customers, like American Express and Dolby on especially remote hiring right now, but generally just implementing Codility into their hiring processes overall. So just a quick introduction. I know that it's no news to anyone here that we're all at home right now, but I did want to kind of share some research that Codility has been doing around the state of remote hiring, not just in the current state, but just overall in the landscape of how we work together in enterprises. So last year we actually found, and I won't go through each of these, but one big thing that we saw was that only 16% of companies had a fully remote structure. A couple of examples of customers or partners of ours would be people like GitLab or GitLab, and then also a couple others that we work with. But one thing that really jumped out at me with this is that the bottom stat here is that 61% of software engineers want to have the ability to work remote. Right now, we all, of course, are all working remote because we have to, but that big discrepancy between 16% and 61%, I think is really where we're gonna see the gap close, after we kind of get back to our normal day-to-day. So I think it's really important as we continue to work like this for the foreseeable future, but then also as we go back to offices eventually, really keep in mind that flexibility and being able to create those positive work experiences for our organizations and essentially internal customers we work with. But moving on to just a couple of suggestions that we have. Codility really has built our product around being able to use it anywhere, whether it's in person in an interview or online at home, between the first, let's say, initial recruiter phone screen all the way to, let's say, an interview with a hiring manager. And really what we're focusing on here today is that the future of work is going to include that flexibility where you're able to really set the stage for your employees about being able to work both in an office and remote, not just during the crisis that we're currently in. And so just a couple of quick suggestions and benefits of remote hiring that I've seen work really well for our customers. So really, like I mentioned, I'm working mainly with teams that have large global offices. Maybe they're working in the Bay Area. We actually have a team in Warsaw, Poland, as does one of our customers, Dolby, and then maybe even working overseas in other locations. And what's really great about having a remote culture is being able to source from a wider pool of applicants and being able to really hire the best talent wherever they're located. And that goes for our customers, but as well as for Codility. We have our CRO is based in Boston, our engineering team is in Warsaw, and then I'm here in San Francisco. Something that I think is specific, a benefit to what's going on right now is that there is a lot of kind of uncertainty and moving pieces going on, and being able to take a remote first approach and having those processes laid out and really agreed upon internally allows you to move candidates faster through the process, especially now where there's a lot of things going on. Being able to really create that good experience and plan ahead for it is really important, especially because we are still in a market where we want to be able to bring those candidates on if we are still hiring. And then again, I kind of highlighted this before, but being able to offer that flexible work environment for your employees. Our research shows that when you're able to, bring some more remote aspects to your hiring, it has a really positive effect on employee retention and being able to engage with them, long term as a, I guess, internal customer. And then last but not least, I would be remiss to not mention a little bit about what Codility does and how you can use us in your process. So some things that I've learned working with customers over the years, and this applies to remote hiring as well as non-remote hiring, but really ironing out a set process ahead of time and being able to really upfront with a group, whether it's, with your recruiter, with your hiring manager, but agreeing upon a defined set of skills that you guys are working towards, especially when it comes to engineering roles. Now that we're all, communicating, let's say online via Slack or via web conference, we want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what's required of the candidate so that we're able to really move them forward in the process effectively and not cause any confusion. And then the second big piece for everyone that's been part of an interview process, you want to make sure you ask the right questions. We're not able to really, let's say I'll jump in a room right after an interview and talk about our first gut reactions right now. And so really agreeing ahead of time what we're going to ask the candidate and who's going to ask it. Making sure there's not a ton of overlap and really understanding and moving towards getting the right screen and information from the candidate that's going to enable you to make a decision on whether or not you want to hire them, especially in this kind of remote time. And then last but not least, planning for remote and after the hire. I think this is the one area where it's a little bit more greenfield. There's a lot of teams that have been doing varying levels of remote interviewing, whether it be phone screens or let's say live coding interviews in the past, but really also planning ahead for when you do make that hire, if you're hiring right now, to plan how to onboard that employee remotely, getting them the materials, making sure the processes in place are clear and that there's clear accountability for not only the new employee, but for the other teammates who will be involved in their onboarding process as well. And just a kind of a quick note on some ways that Codility can help you do this. So we have two kind of flagship products in most of our core plans, which are our Code Check, which is a take-home live coding test, and then also Code Live, which is our essentially paired programming live interviewing functionality. And some benefits of being able to use this in your process is that since it already has been designed to be remote first, whether it be online coding assessments where the candidate is taking it on their own, or if you're joining with them to run through a couple of different scenarios, we're really enabling you to choose from a standardized set of maybe questions that are really core to the skill requirements that you've defined, and also being able to share that feedback, collaborate across the organization. We have test reports for both our take-home tests and live coding interviews that allow you to share feedback, take notes, and actually share them across the organization internally. And when it comes to live interviewing, being able to join a video conference and run through actual code with a web editor is really helpful. It kind of takes that whiteboarding theory kind of off the whiteboard and puts it into a more real-life scenario. And again, you have tools built in to make this really easy for you. You're able to kind of give them that quick gut check right after the interview, and being able to kind of re-emulate that idea of kind of having that quick gut check in person and sharing it across the organization. So really, I don't want to spend all of our time here today kind of talking about all the different products, but really the main theory here is that we're going to help you take these processes and make them remote pretty quickly and very easily. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Scott so you guys can hear from our awesome panel today. They definitely have a lot of insights that I'm interested in learning, and thank you so much for your time.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Sinead. Great. So let's dive in. So I'm going to ask the panelists and myself, we'll go ahead and share our webcams. All right. I see Rick there. I see Andre. Fantastic. Great. Thanks again so much for joining, gentlemen. I'd love to maybe just start and begin. Would love for you guys to be able to give some formal introductions, a little bit about yourself, the organizations that you work for, in your kind of official capacities, and would just like to maybe start there. So maybe I'll go ahead and start with Andre.
Nice to meet you guys. Hello, everybody. I'm working at Loft as a tech recruiter. So, what is Loft? Loft is a startup in Brazil who's really trying to reinvent the way to find a home for you. So, all the buying process, find some place to live in Brazil is very now old school and without any kind of data. So, we're trying to use more data, more information, data inputs, market inputs to make your buying and find your home very well. So I'm responsible to help finding the best with the developers, data science, product managers from the company. It's a very fast way. Good.
Wonderful, great. And Rick?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Hey, Andre. Rick Iversen, I'm head of talent for Rakuten for the Americas. I think people know the name Rakuten probably, but what Rakuten does is we're a front to back e-commerce solution that is front loaded on the rewards platform, shopping rewards of all kinds. And then we have a back end analytics platform, Rakuten Advertising, that really helps the brands parse and determine where their most effective places are to market. And it all kind of comes together in this total e-commerce platform. We're the third largest e-commerce company in the world. And we're global. And it's all encompassing globally. So you can imagine during this time that we're in, it's very interesting depending upon the pockets with which we're operating.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you again, both of you, for joining. So I want to go ahead and just kind of set the stage here with a kind of an opening question. Obviously, I was thinking through this, even though it's been just a few weeks, I feel like it's been a lot longer in terms of how the world's actually changed, right? And how we've been impacted, directly and then also indirectly by the coronavirus. I know our group here at Codility, we actually went fully remote as a team right around the second week of March. And so I'd love to open it up, and we could start with Rick this time. You mentioned globally. Rick, how has the last 3 or 4 weeks kind of been in terms of your approach with everything being remote right now? And would just like to see and understand like what that process has been like, and maybe walk us through some of the challenges there, and maybe even the opportunities.
Yeah, no, it's been really interesting. I'll tell you, the thing that's been interesting, if you start from my team, my talent acquisition team, I have basically a global team that sits in London, New York, and the Bay Area. And so we're a little bit used to operating remotely and interacting with each other as sort of a remote team. But the flip side is that traditionally Japanese companies don't operate in a work from home or a remote fashion. And it's not something that has been a best practice for us really at all. We actually very, very recently just enacted a very loose work from home policy, where if you make an arrangement with your hiring manager, or with your manager, you can make arrangements for like once a week or once a couple times a month to work from home. So as a company, we've made this massive pivot, and our leadership, Adrian Colson and Amit Patel, spearheaded this shift that I've been incredibly impressed with. So IT, people, talent acquisition, engineering, marketing, everything has just gone remote. Like you said, we went out on the 16th, and it's as if we've been operating this way all along. We did slow hiring down ever so slightly, but for mission critical hiring, we've remained intact. We've been doing remote onboarding. The IT team has been able to maintain enough laptops and all the other things to get them dispersed out. It's been remarkable, frankly, considering that we traditionally are just not a remote working company, and now we are. And for us to make that shift the way that we have has been a credit to everybody. My team in particular has been incredible, and has just moved right on as if we've been doing this all along. So it's been a really interesting process. I've been really pleasantly surprised with how nimble we've been through all of it.
It's fantastic. Andre, I'd like to turn to you and kind of ask this a similar question. How has remote life been for you and the organization, and how has that impacted things overall?
In fact, for the organization, it's more fast forward for some plans we have, because we already think about having more remote employees, not just because we want to find the best talents, because we understand it's going to be good for the company and everybody can work for where they want, but nobody's ready like to one day for another, everybody's going to be home. So we're trying to give all the support we need. It's been good because we can understand how to work remotely in the first place, how we can connect, how we can still have our usually meetings, some social stuff we would like to have and share good moments. And we think about hiring. It's also being nice because we're already trying to make our hiring process very remotely, but we have some persons who is still thinking it's going to be nice to know the person. I like to meet the candidate in person. So when you go everybody remotely, nobody can meet anyone in person. Just like fast forward all our plans, and we try to provide everybody like good training about hiring and good training about how to work remotely too. When you talk about like infrastructure, we give all the things the person need, like notebooks, screens, chairs. We're trying to make all the more comfortable they want. And I don't know, maybe we're trying to have more people remotely and still remotely after the coronavirus ends. So it's been in a certain way very fine.
Yeah, I think. Thank you. That's great. I think one of the themes that I'm hearing, and interesting how this kind of marries up and ties together with both of you. In particular, what you had mentioned, Rick, for organizations that typically prior to the last couple of weeks had not really fully embraced organizationally, being remote, and now how this is kind of forced in a sense. And shifted that mindset. I'd be curious to understand like how, we'll go back to Rick on this one. You said kind of the nimbleness, you've been really impressed with how everyone's just kind of acclimated pretty quickly, has been really impressive, specifically for you kind of being a global enterprise entity. I'd like to understand, over the last couple of weeks, what are some of the specifics that you've been really impressed with? And do you think that this is gonna, after we kind of come out of this on the other side, what are some of the things that you think you might change specifically to either your hiring process or how you approach things moving forward?
Yeah, so the thing that's impressed me most has been the coordination around remote onboarding of new hires. And in particular, the way our IT team has been able to mobilize around that. Equally, I've been impressed with my team in terms of how they've been able to just keep the candidates flowing, keep my recruiting coordinators just on point with scheduling, and everybody who's been interviewing being on point with being on their Zoom calls, being on time, and just adapting as if this is something that we've been doing. Really has been impressive. We have spiced it in, throughout, but really to just have to do this full time and be pretty much seamless about it has been incredibly impressive. What I'm really curious about, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, in particular, is what is it going to be like when shelter is toned down, and are we going to be coming on site in shifts? And is there a full trust of workforces being remote and much less on site, and hoteling I think goes by the wayside, and you have assigned spaces, and maybe you only come to your assigned space 2 or 3 days a week, and the rest of the time you're working from home. I think all of it is sort of out there and needs to be addressed, and I know will be. But for me, as a talent leader, I think the biggest thing is I've always operated from a place of trying to bring the best talent to organizations with my teams. And we've always looked at decentralized options in different locations where there's exceptional talent, but maybe they're not, in the Bay Area, and so there's a lot of benefits to that. Now this whole proposition completely changes that to a very, very beneficial thing, both for our economy and for the technology workforce. If somebody outstanding is sitting in Montana, I think it's a much more viable option than having a remote office that they could access that's maybe a couple 100 miles away. So you could pull that talent. Like we have Beloit, and we've that's in Wisconsin, and we've turned that into somewhat of a hub, and it's been great. And really cool way to pull remote talent, but now you don't even have to have the office itself, So will we embrace that? Will we be able to maximize that? I hope so, because I think it's a game changer for talent acquisition.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, very, very well said. I think you're on point, and that's something in conversations with I think a lot of our customers too. In coming out on the other side of this, I think that there's a enormous opportunity really available from the learnings of this, right? As much as we were kind of forced into it, I think that there's massive learnings and opportunities that are gonna, really change the entire landscape potentially of hiring across the board. So couldn't agree more. I've got a question here now for you, Andre. I want to go back to some of the things you said, and specific to the candidate experience, right? And so obviously, we doing a couple interviews, remote with a candidate is always great, but it's really hard to get a full sense of a candidate without actually meeting them in person, right? And so I think you kind of brought that up. I'd love to understand, from your perspective, is there anything unique, or is there anything that you guys are interjecting or have changed within your hiring tactics or process specific to the kind of the last rounds of interviews, where typically you would have someone come on site or have someone meet with folks? What does that kind of look like for you guys at Loft?
Okay, I think one important stuff is just give a fast explanation for our process. Have like a first part that's only technical, and then you're going for the soft skills. And usually our process is very fast, and it's like we're gonna have an interview in 6 or 7 others, and you have like 1 hour interview done, go fast. And we start to have this concern about, okay, how are you gonna understand better the person? How understand the work cultural fit? And in person is nice, you can have some different feelings, you can better understand the person. But what we do, it's like give more time for interviews. Okay, so we usually have like 1 hour interview, and you start understanding maybe 1 hour is not gonna be enough to just start making the questions, just have some space for the candidate, and maybe this doesn't feel very comfortable. Okay, and never go to Loft, I just talk to like 5 persons, what I can do. So we give more space for the candidates to explain, to have questions, to understand the company. Other stuff we like to do, it's we have like a virtual tour about our office, so we can show our office. You can give some videos about our culture, what we're doing about coronavirus moments, what we are doing about our employees outside the home office. They have to sometimes go to some buildings and understand what's happened. So we are trying to give them more information and understand with them how they feel about it. So this makes the interviews go longer, but this is another way to find if the person have our cultural fit and how we can see if they feel connected or not with us.
Great, that's great. Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense too. Rick, I'd like to pose the same question to you from kind of the candidate side experience. What have you heard from your global team, and is there anything that you've shifted or changed in the process regarding the candidate experience and not being able to have kind of that final in-person step, so to speak?
Yeah, so it's interesting time for us to answer the question directly first. I don't know yet what it's been like day in and day out. Everything has gone off fine. Interviews have been happening. There haven't been a lot of glitches or anything like that. So far so good. But we'll see. In terms of process change, this is pure luck, fortuitous or whatever. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but we're right in the midst of completely overhauling our systems and our whole process around interviewing, where we've been on sort of a two-year path where we've gotten to this point, and now we're completely systematizing our interviewing process so that we're much more formal and focused and organized around how we interview, and that actually launches in May. So it's really on the top of my mind because I'm in these planning meetings. I'm driving this, and I'm in these planning meetings. And so I think universally speaking, whether you're remote or not, there is just a certain level of being organized around your interviews and how you organize scorecards if you use them, and how do you do interview assignments, and how do you do handoffs. All this, I think, can be much smoother virtually. I think there can be back channel communication that can be very helpful from one interviewer handing off to another. So I think these are a lot of things that we're thinking about as we're finalizing this training that we're going to do in May, and then going live with all of this new process and systems. So it remains to be seen if we pull it off, but that we are thinking about it. And my point of view is that I think there's a lot of advantages to this way of doing things, and I think it's just about trust at this point, trusting technology, and trusting that all of this stuff, I think, is overbuilt and more than ready to take on everything that's being thrust into it by we have no choice.
Absolutely, yeah, very, very, very well said. I'd like to change topics quickly, so that really gives, I think, hopefully the audience too, a really good foundation and fundamental around what you guys have been faced organizationally, and how you've kind of acclimated to things and instituted different processes to kind of take this challenge head on. I'd like to move to a topic around kind of sourcing and attracting talent. So I think in the last week, there's been, I saw an article where Google is actually going to move their typical campus recruitment process to completely remote. So I'd love to maybe start out and understand from sourcing and attracting talent perspective, and maybe even specifically around campus type of recruitment, or just type of recruitment events in general. What are you guys faced with now, and what are you thinking through in terms of what that might look like, right? And maybe I'll start with Andre on this one.
Okay, about sourcing and attracting candidates, what I think what's most changed for me is because some people doesn't feel very comfortable in change companies now. But I don't know, it's my perspective because I work from startups in the last years, so everything's more fast. I don't know, I already work in other companies, but it's just like I'm gonna find a candidate no matter where they are in Brazil. And I send a message, no problems at all, but some people doesn't feel very comfortable when we change a place. They feel very stable, they know how the company works, to join a new company, and then you start off less than 2 years of life. So I think that's things most being changed for me in our recruiting perspective, and attracting good candidates. What we're trying to do is, in the first conversation, explain, even we have like 2 years of life, we are the fast unicorn at Brazil. So this can give us a lot of certainty that we're still gonna exist after everything ends. But some people still like, okay, we're not gonna live in this company I have. Maybe after everything ends, we can start talking with you guys. I think that's what's most changed for me.
Sure, great. Rick, how about you guys? What have you thought about in terms of either campus recruitment or sourcing? How has that changed or not? based off of the last couple of weeks?
So I'll answer in two parts. University recruiting. Again, I think we've been a little bit fortunate because we've just brought in a new head of university recruiting at Rakuten, Michelle Leffler, and she's really experienced, and she has experience both building teams sort of remotely, for geographic purposes, but also being on campus. And and I think we take it a step further. And when we think about university recruiting, we also think about D&I, and that's a great forum for us to really recruit from a D&I perspective. And what we have been talking about and working towards is how do we get involved with on-campus groups and network with them in a way that is not just your standard career fair. And so now that a lot of this stuff has gone remote, I think it just takes our strategy to a more accessible place, frankly, to be able to do webinars and things like this is what we will look at. And there's great tools now that really bring the UR talent pool from all the universities to you. And so I think it's sort of pulling all that together and figuring out what your niche and what your sweet spot and what your directive is. And that's really what Michelle is doing and shaping now. So I think we're very much a work in progress, but I think this actually benefits us, this being a much more mainstream forum, meaning virtual. From a sourcing perspective, going bigger picture, and if anybody on my team is on listening, you should plug your ears because you don't want to hear me preach again. Because I preach this, but this is all about, and this never stops, but in particular, I think in this particular window, there's a lot of people out there who are in various companies that are in stages of funding that maybe is precarious. And, relationships are everything in recruiting, and it's not the first reach out where you get a candidate to come and interview you. It's because of a long-standing relationship. It's because you've prospected and you've built something with them. I think now more than ever, getting back to basics and really being dialed into your prospecting and never getting away from that when this all goes sort of somewhat stable again. Keeping your good habits, and so this shouldn't be something you're starting now because you're remote, hopefully, but going forward, I think building relationships in a time when people are confused and scared, and just reaching out to them and not pitching them something, but just saying, hey man, I really just want to see how you're doing, and what's happening, and let's just talk about how you're coping with this. I think that's authentic, and that's where I'm driving my team to come from. And they're probably really tired of hearing that, and sorry they tuned in.
No problem.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you both. I think there's something to be said. I actually, if anyone's on my team's listening, I think I've been also preaching this too, at least from our customer side, is having that sense of compassion too, right? So bringing that sense of empathy and compassion throughout the process, I think is key, right? Especially in kind of these times that we're living in right now. And so I think that enabling that in the process and making it part of the DNA, if you will, I think is really really important to strive. So really good to hear that. I do want to take a moment. I'm looking at our question queue in. It's looking a little sad. So I want to remind our customers, or excuse me, our attendees, that they have the ability to type in questions in that question queue. So if there's anything on your mind that you'd like to ask either Rick or Andre, please do so. And so I just want to kind of encourage that. So kind of in that, I think this actually segues to another really good topic, specifically around culture. So I'd like to understand from both of your guys' perspectives the impact that you've seen around kind of the remote culture, again, and maybe how that's looked prior and how that's looked now, and what you guys are trying to do to make sure that there's a sense of culture, throughout your individual roles and your orgs and what you guys do, but then also within the hiring process, and trying to promote that culture that you guys have right now, and institute that within the hiring process. So I'll turn over to Andre now and talk through culture.
Good. When I think it's like global culture about the company, first, we are trying to understand when we still have our work-life balance, okay? And that's how it's going to reflect in hiring. Because it's easy when you look someone, they still at the office, they are working, I can call them, I can pitch them, but when they're at home, I don't know if they are working or not, or what sometimes can be worse, if they can work 24/7, because if I just need, you're at home, you're not doing nothing, so please answer my Slack message. So we are trying to figure out how we can still have your work-life balance, understand the prioritization, and still comfortable to know you are still working for us, you are still looking for our goals, and we are working in a certain way. When you're looking for the hiring process, it's like it's trying to put in more meetings to make it understanding how the things are evolving. We feel like we are understanding more about pitching candidates. One thing like it's important, I totally agree with Rick about being more empathetic, understand what the moment of the persons. And there is some companies like in Brazil, they are firing some good employees because they can have money. So, okay, sorry, that's gonna happen, that's in front of happen. And we are trying to give this priority for this kind of candidates. Good candidates that just get be fired, but still looking for a new job. So we are trying to make all the hiring process still working in a certain way. Have good meetings to make them being aligned for what we are looking for, and we are still prioritization like senior roles. It's something that's still evolve, something that like to reinforce the importance of our culture in the day by day, not being like, okay, I still work at Loft, but at my home, you at your home. So how can make the sense of being a company, being a team together every day? So it's something that we're trying to figure out, some good initiatives, some old and nice calls, but it's work sometimes, but you have to involve something in other points. That's what I think.
That's very good, very good. Rick, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to talk through too, like culture, process, how that's been impacted, and how you try to maintain that.
I think from a cultural perspective, I'll speak to my team because I think we haven't been in this long enough yet to speak to the company's culture, but I'm obviously involved in leadership at the people level, and there's a lot to talk about culture and how this is being impacted, but we haven't done anything yet. From a team perspective, I've personally been concerned because I have a team that's dispersed and pretty big and ranges in experience, and so my big concern as a leader has been has everybody been impacted. And what are they feeling and how are they feeling, and making sure that they feel connected and making sure that they feel like, hey, I know you're out there and we all care about you and we want to pull you in. So I've probably been checking in with individuals, every single individual on the team, a lot more than I would. I like to let my managers lead their teams. But in a situation like this, culturally speaking, I know everybody and I care about everybody and I want everybody to know that and to feel connected. I think it's a much bigger effort to make sure that there is connection. But the flip side of it, which has been hilarious and fun, has been how much more loose and relaxed people are in terms of different backgrounds that they put behind them and things that they put on their head and their face. Somebody was on a Zoom call the other day as a potato, kind of corny, but it's also hilarious. I mean, it lightens things up. And what I have noticed from a cultural perspective that I think is to be noted is people seem more relaxed and connected and on point in the Zoom meetings than maybe if you're anonymous in a conference room and on a Zoom meeting. So I don't know if that's just because this is new. That remains to be seen. But I don't have like an earth-shattering sort of way that we're doing things right now. I'm really feel like I'm mostly flying by the seat of my pants.
Yeah, I think
to be true.
I think a lot of us are. There's probably most folks are probably virtually shaking their head right now too. But I tend to agree with you. I think even speaking for Codility, we've actually done some really cool things. We had a group bingo night where folks had an opportunity we played a bingo game and folks dressed up and things like that. I like the innovation around it, right? And what people are coming up with. And I agree with you too. I think it relaxes people a little bit more because they're in they're in their own environment and we get to see people. I've got a couple of children. They're coming in and out of the room sometimes, and I think it just kind of humanizes the experience a little bit more. I think that on the whole has been kind of a net positive.
The kids coming in and out has been, I think, not really nice, and people have been surprisingly at ease around that, myself included. I felt I haven't been as uptight as I think I normally would be if my daughter comes in and photobombs a Zoom call. So yeah.
Great. Well, now we've got a really active audience now, and from the attendees, we've got several questions that have popped up. So I want to use the remaining 15 minutes or so here to really dive into some of the audience questions. So first question here is, what does your full day on-site interview look like remotely? When you would have normally had one interviewer go in and out of the on-site interview room, and how are you doing that remotely? So I will go back to Rick maybe on this one to start.
Yep. Well, so we've got a process anyways in place that doesn't matter. We vacillate, right? We have people who are remote. We have people who are on site. We have great recruiting coordinators and recruiters who are dialed in, and they are shepherding the process, right? And making sure that these things come off to the best of our ability. The training that we're creating that'll happen in May is about hiring teams, owning interview assignments, timing, and the conversation in the hallway when you're handing off one interviewer to another. That the way I would envision pivoting this, and this has been discussed, is that this happens now over whatever you use, Slack, Viber, Teams, but that there's a channel. And what actually, I've personally used in the past is we've had a Slack recruiting channel that we've used to manage interviews and keep the interviews flowing. And so I think that and it works very, very effectively, and that's what we're going to be training towards. For me, in the training that we're building that has remote in mind, it's just about being on point, organized, and each interviewer and interview team knowing exactly what they're interviewing for. And that the hiring manager takes responsibility to make sure that everybody who's interviewing is debriefed and prepared, and that the people who are interviewing are prepared to interview. And I think that is something that we're going to really drive, and my team is going to be responsible for making sure that we're teed up that way. Because in this environment, you can't come in sort of unprepared and half-cocked and just sort of winging it. I think it would ring hollow with the candidate that much more. So we're mindful and just trying to keep the structure in the same fashion that it should be, whether you're live or whether you're virtual.
Fantastic. So we've got a lot of questions coming through now, and I want to try to get in as many as possible here. So I'm actually going to switch topics over to you, Andre. And so this is a question from one of the audience members. Actually, it looks like it's speaking specifically to Codility. So did you start your Codility journey hoping to make the assessment process more efficient, or were you hoping to redefine the way you hire?
So it's a pretty nice question. Let me think a little bit before answer. I'm ready for the other one that's Rick answer because I have like interesting facts about that. But okay. Interesting. When I started using Codility, I think the tool helped us a lot to reinvent. First, sorry guys, I don't have kids in home, so I have like a dog barking in the back. Sorry for that. We use Codility more to helping us in the first stage of the process, but when starting doing remotely, most of the technical interviews are usually done in a whiteboard. And I can do these whiteboards remotely in a nice quality. Okay, I open a Google Docs and type there. It's going to be awful. In fact, it was awful. We tried that. So Codility help us in the algorithm and code design process to make more sure that's what we're interviewing is good. I totally agree with Rick. It's very important this moment have very set up. What we are evaluating. Everybody has to be very aligned what you are looking for, because one thing have to keep in mind, Brazilians are a very warm person. People, we like to talk, we like to stay conversation, but when you're doing remotely, sometimes you can feel, let's say, you use these words. So it's very important to have like, what are you evaluating? What's a good answer? What's a yellow flag answer? What's, oh my God, please don't say that again. We're gonna have a heart attack. Let's put in some fancy words. Okay, so Codility is helping us in these stages, and we can evaluate what's the core about the candidate, and probably is gonna still using this after everything's come back to the normal. It's been a very nice experience.
Very good, very good.
I answered the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, we're getting a lot of questions now, so I'm going to try to pick a couple here. Rick, I'll give this one to you. How have your hiring managers adjusted to making a final hiring decision without physically meeting a candidate? Have they adjusted the debrief sessions, added an extra interview? Anything around that particular process?
So again, I think we're early days into this, and so we've been making hiring decisions, and we've been doing it. I think we've for the most part had the benefit of a lot of candidates having been with us live before we went into shelter, but we are setting up the process and the training that we have launching in May. With a very formal way of making decisions too. And we happen to use scorecards, and we will be training our hiring managers to customize the scorecards to their interview assignments, and then use all of that in their roundtables at post live to make decisions. And we literally are going to train on making decisions and how you organize your decision making before you even launch, right, in the intake and the pre-intake process, really setting the stage of who you're looking to hire and what the role is, and then how will you make that decision on the back end, and organizing that all the way through. It doesn't matter if you're live or if you're virtual, your applicant tracking system for the most part will drive that, and of course can be done virtually. You can flash up, you can share screen, and roundtable very effectively remotely, and that's what we plan to do. It won't change anything, but we need to get there, because I think it's a really good question. As this moves on, there are going to be a lot of hiring decisions that are going to be made. We're launching an executive search right now, and frankly, I'm concerned about it because we have to go through it virtually right now in these early stages. And you're maybe not going to have that opportunity. So I guess to stay tuned for some fine tuning that we may want to do around. Maybe you do a virtual coffee meeting with if it's an executive search, maybe it's a virtual coffee meeting with the CEO and this candidate, and maybe you do it after hours, and they're in a more relaxed setting so that they can get a feel. I think we're going to have to get creative around that, because we are going to have to make hiring decisions without having the opportunity to physically sit with somebody. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, that is definitely interesting. Great. I want to move on to another question. I'll give this one over to you, Andre. This has specifically around kind of internal training. So the question is, what kind of training have you done with the hiring teams to help them prepare better to virtually interview more effectively?
Okay. One thing we have like here at Loft, things happen really fast, and sometimes you have time to prepare very long trainings. So when you just pivot our hiring process for remotely, and we need to evaluate the candidates for code design skills and algorithm skills, you understand that Codility is going to help us with this. What we do is stop like a day and get together with everybody in a conference call. Okay, let's understand how this tool works and make some role plays. So we ask for one engineer, make a test for other engineer, how they evaluate, how this is going to be this change. You have to explain how the tool works. And at the end, how it's going to be like, okay, we finish, how we evaluate the candidate. You have to submit the feedback from me. Because when you have like debriefing sessions in person, you can go deep in the questions. Sometimes people are physically in person, so we can make more cap questions and get together in what we are looking for and what's our evaluation. But when we are starting doing this remotely, you have to have very clear what you're looking for in the candidate. So what we're doing in the first stage, very short brief, it's we show the tool for everybody. You explain how the tool works. We explain how our questions are going to be inside the tool, and we simulate some questions between each engineers. You pick some engineers that are part of our recruiting process to interview other ones that are not part of the recruiting process. So you can have like a perspective with someone who's never used the tool, never saw the tool. So it's going to be like our candidate, and someone that's part of the recruiting process. And we can like share moments, and we start documenting that. So everybody who help us now can have access for this, and we have always a fast debrief for how you use the tool first.
Great, great. I want to move on to, there's another question, and this is interesting. I was actually going to talk through this if we weren't going to get any more questions. So obviously there's looking through kind of the end-to-end spectrum here of sourcing and then hiring, of course, onboarding. So you go through the process, you find that awesome, talented candidates, you make an offer. Now we're in a world of a complete, rollout of remote onboarding. So Rick, maybe I'd like to direct this question to you. Someone wants to understand some best practices for what you guys have maybe already put into place, or how are you guys looking through kind of the back end of this in terms of onboarding potential new candidates too?
Yeah, it's tricky, and this is a place where I've been extremely impressed with our IT team in particular, but also our service operations organization within the people team. They take our onboarding and they've systematized it where they can basically just disperse laptops remotely that are completely set up, and then we have a great leader of talent management, Chris Lawson, who's built a fantastic Neo that literally you can log on to through Workday. So we, I don't know that we've actually onboarded, but that should be happening, I think, this week. But we have the structure in place where we've been able to pivot. We've been able to get everybody everything that they need, and we will be able to do our Neo remotely and really sort of business as usual, get people dialed in. I think what we don't know yet, and what we'll take a close look at, is what happens on the back end 30, 60, 90 days. How are we embracing and enveloping new hires so that they really get on the path to success and feeling dialed into the organization? I think that's going to be something that requires a lot of thought and trial and error and revisit and revisit and revisit. And I think it goes back to, again, really being tight on your interviewing and really pulling people in the interview process. And having that give and take around understanding them both culturally and how they fit for the role.
Absolutely. Great. So I just want to do a quick time check here. We're almost at the top of the hour, with just a couple minutes remaining. I've really thoroughly enjoyed this discussion. Hopefully our audience has as well. Appreciate them providing these questions, and really appreciate your guys' time today in helping us kind of get more organized around this new world. I'd love to maybe just offer each of you guys, another minute here. Is there anything else you'd like to recommend for the audience in terms of remote hiring practices, or any other thoughts or feedback that you'd like to kind of offer here at the end? And I'll go ahead and start with Andre.
Okay, I think from my perspective, still being human. It can sound a little bit cliche, but it's a nice moment to have very intimate moments, understand the other one on the other side, and be more open to answer questions, be more human, and not, you are my candidate, let's put this in these terms. You are another person looking for something, and how I can help you. I think that's most different moment, and I hope that's can move forward after the coronavirus ends.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I would echo that, Andre. I think that I really appreciate being on a forum like this and just being able to connect with everybody. And I would love to connect with anybody who wants to connect and talk more offline. I think it's a great opportunity for us to become more human to one another and connect with each other on best practices and ways we can help each other operate, cross-pollinate, if you will, in terms of best practices that are just better for everybody. Because I think we do have to think about things now, social distancing, and I think us teaming up as a talent acquisition community and being creative and sharing those ideas with each other in forums like this, or just connecting with each other directly. I personally encourage it, and I'm reaching out to my peers all the time. And I'm open to that and would encourage it. So I really appreciate I'm always love doing this kind of stuff, and I just appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Absolutely. Well, we're just right about at time here. So again, I want to formally thank you guys for making the time today. I know how busy you are, and again, in light of everything that's going on, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.